I've mentioned meter management a few times, and mostly it comes down to mental factors like awareness and planning and having a solid idea of what is worth spending resources on in a given matchup all predetermined in your head. But you might also appreciate some basic helpful tips for how to best spend your resources in the moment and from a contemplative point of view. This all, of course, heavily depends on your character. Some characters you almost never see a super from because they get way more value out of their EX moves, like Blanca or Laura. But in general, there's a few ways that you can think about spending meter in terms of the value you get from it. Obviously, the ideal is that each bar equates to the highest value it can possibly provide. Maybe in an immediate sense or a more abstract sense, in terms of damage output, setups, positioning, and mental damage or conditioning. There is also value in just having meter, because it creates the threat of any option you might use with it. A lot of supers in this game are powerful tools for reacting to things like fireballs in the mid-range, or confirming or closing out a round when both players are at low health, or granting unique punish opportunities that shut down certain tools from the opponent later on in a round. Then, you have some characters that get good setups off of their supers, while others don't. Let's take a basic character like Ryu, with a not really great super, being a projectile and only granting a few unique punishes and conversion situations due to it not hitting that far, that fast. Let's say the only value he gets from it is the damage output. If he starts a round with full meter, especially if the opponent has a lot less meter and is thus at a round start disadvantage, the Ryu might want to find the first opportunity to land that super, or otherwise spend the meter. This seems like common sense, if you have max meter, you aren't building any more meter. So if you take any action that would have built meter, you're wasting bar you could have been building. You have to decide if your current situation will grant more value by looking for the right place to spend at least some of what you currently have, versus the possibility of building more after you spend it. Last round low health situations are unlikely for you to even be sure that if you spend some meter, you'll build it back more and get to use more of it afterwards, so you might as well hold on to it until the right moment comes. But at the start of a round with full meter, maybe you want to spend that fast so you can at least start building more. That depends on your character, that depends on what you want in the matchup, that depends on if landing a very early super will give your opponent V-trigger while robbing you of your potentially defensive EX moves. Just spending a bar to throw an EX fireball that probably won't accomplish much is still just wasting your meter. Sure, you can argue that it puts fear into your opponent, fear of your randomness, and the idea that you might throw more random EX fireballs, but still. If you can land your super really fast in a round, it'll give you a huge life lead. Some characters work better with a life lead than others. And your life is also a resource to manage, which we'll talk about. But to keep it simple, life leads are a big deal. If you have a sizable lead on your opponent and they don't have the immediate resources to even, to balance things out, to even the scales with their next confirmed, you're probably sitting pretty. However, that's probably the only situation I'd recommend using supers when it won't kill, or at least put the opponent at like a pixel of life. See, if you spend the super and the match is halfway done, it'll put them at maybe 30% life left. You probably just gave them V-trigger if they didn't have it already. You definitely removed a lot of your own tools that might have been helpful for you to defend against their V-trigger. And unless you still have full health, against a lot of characters, your life lead won't even be that comfortable if the opponent has all their resources. You'll still have to either finish the job with solid hits with no meter, or wait out the clock. If you're close to waiting out the clock, then yeah, spend the super. A lot of supers have long animations that are great for wasting time and getting a time over life lead victory. But if not, then it's a long road ahead of you for you to be putting yourself in a situation where neither of you are about to kill the other, but they probably have more cards and you just showed your hand. Beyond that, there's also just a mathematical side of combo optimization. Is spending 2 bars in this combo really that much more damage than spending 1 bar in the combo? See how much value you're actually getting out of each resource to measure your optimization. In fact, when you're looking over your replays, go ahead and look at a few matches and examine how you spend your resources. How much total resources did you spend, and what mathematical value did you get out of them per unit? you can start to see how valuable certain decisions are, at least in a microcosm, as opposed to others that way. And once again, to be fair, some values are hard to quantify. Since the value might come from applying mental damage, it might come from the potential that you could have gotten a bigger sequence going. For instance, you might think that spending all your bar really fast to keep plus frames on the enemy without actually opening them up is wasted. Like, why do an EX Fireball on block over and over in the corner if you know it will most likely be blocked? But a lot of the time, it has good mental damage. People get antsy. People don't like to block for too long, especially if they feel like they're in some kind of danger. And that gets a bit too much into the mental side for this current video, but it is a valid excuse to spend extra meter sometimes. And also, if the opponent is below half health and you land a good combo with full resources, maybe it's better off for you to do a meterless combo, assuming it has like decent Oki or you don't need to escape the corner at the moment, anything else pressing matters, since you'll put the opponent in a situation where maybe one hit into super will kill them. That's a great situation for you to be in. It's much better for you than if you had spent a bar or maybe your super, it's on a big chunk of damage, but then put them in a situation where a throw still won't kill them, ship can't kill them, and you don't have your super anymore to utilize in a variety of situations or shut down some of their options. Obviously, just knowing what you can and can't do with your meter is important. It's not just big optimal combos that end in supers where you use them. In fact, damage scaling inherently makes you get less value per unit of meter landing a raw super or a super even with very little scaling. You know, like, make sure you lab out what new tools you get access to with your meter and what you can use to counter the opponent and shut down some of their options, or unique hit confirms you can only do with meter. Being optimal with everything going on can be tricky sometimes. Take Akuma, for example. I just realized my microphone was off, so I'm going to do a very funny thing where I am recording myself looking at my own recording. Alright, so basically, EX Tatsu, if I do an EX Tatsu combo, it does more damage than the EX Fireball combo. So same amount of resources, that's the EX Fireball route. My mouse right there is where the EX Tatsu damage put it at. So EX Tatsu route does more damage. However, if we get into a long scaling sequence, I do I get the stun with a lot of scaling. EX Tatsu route, so same amount of resources, EX Tatsu does that much. Red Fireball has unique properties where it does better the more scaling it is, because when you do it point blank, it burns the opponent, which does true damage that ignores the damage scaling of the combo. So in this situation, spend the exact same resources in the same sequence, get slightly more damage for following up the combo after the scaling got to that point. So that's what it is. In a similar situation, if the opponent is like very close to being stunned, if I do the damage route that I would normally do, it stuns like on any hit rather than just making sure it does all the damage and then stuns on the last hit. So instead, let's do a different sequence. So if I do that move instead, it stuns on the last hit, which means it doesn't normally do more damage, but because I can get all the damage before it does the stun in the first place and breaks the combo out, it's better. The other noteworthy factor about spending meter to deal more damage is that you give your opponent V-gauge by doing it. In one way of thinking, this could make it so the most optimal thing to do would be to save your resources until you land the hit that will just barely give your opponents their V-trigger, and then spend it all to deal as much damage as possible so that they can't keep building V-gauge because they've already maxed it out. Just like if you have full meter, you're wasting meter you could have been building. If the opponent has full V-gauge, any damage you deal to them before they activate it and re-empty their V-gauge, you will waste potential V-gauge that the opponent could have been building if it wasn't already maxed out. This, of course, depends on what V-trigger they have, and this is usually more unavoidable. You don't always get to choose how much damage you take and when and where, so you naturally end up wasting a lot of V-gauge that could have been built by taking damage with your gauge already full. I'd say this is not the best way to optimize your situation, but it's at least worth considering sometimes in certain matchups if you want to just dump damage right when you see the opponent has taken enough damage to get their trigger. You could also apply more pressure using your resources to someone who has their trigger ready to go, but any offense you will apply will come with risk. and against someone with V-trigger ready, that risk is probably heightened. You might land more hits and make them waste V-gauge that they could have otherwise built. You might make them feel like they have to spend it defensively and thus diffuse the threat of their trigger, but you could also run into a hit, into activation, and then put yourself in a bad spot. This is true of characters who have install-type triggers that are already going to waste V-gauge, because they'll probably take damage in the match before their install runs out. You know, like Cody VT2, Colleen V-trigger 2, G V-trigger 1. They last for so long once they activate their triggers. Like, they're not going to spend it all right away. They're going to take maybe some damage while they're in trigger that they won't build towards their next V-trigger if they're trying to get 2 in a round, or like build up a V-reversal after it's spent. If you're a character like Abigail or Birdie, someone who wants to get in and mix and pressure the opponent, but sometimes finds it's difficult to do so due to their slowness, and they both have supers that grant good Oki, good setups afterwards, you might feel like spending the super in more places than where you would with other characters. High health characters get the added luxury of being able to assume that they'll live a bit longer than other characters, which means that you'll have more opportunities to build any of your resources. A round can be almost over for the opponent, but not be even close to ending for you. That means that you can spend meter more freely with the promise that you'll build it back before you die, assuming things start to go badly. And this goes without saying at this point, but if you can kill, you probably should kill. Don't be stingy. Misers will get fucked in this game. Spend what you have if it will kill. Obviously, let's talk about that concept. There is an inherent gamble associated with spending meter. Like, maybe you could spend all of it now and kill, but perhaps you should try to save some of it to make the next round easier, and take your chances that you can still win this round without spending it. The gamble goes 2 ways, really. There's the element where, if you can afford to lose the current round, like if your opponent is not at match point, then it's not that bad if you save the meter and end up losing the round because of it. Because you still gain valuable information, you might have built extra meter, just like any round that you can afford to lose. But at the same time, if it's the first round, you might as well win it. You can build more meter even if you lose the next round, and go into the third round with a full stock again. However, perhaps the opponent might also go into the third round with more meter than they would go into the second round with, assuming you don't spend the meter but still win the round. This can happen against characters that build a lot of meter but do not require meter to kill you, like zoning characters, if your character struggles against that. Say you're about to kill Manat. You could spend the super. You could have a huge life lead, like you're Abigail or whatever, and she currently has no meter, because, like, you just blocked a wake-up super or something. Now, a Manat with a huge health deficit in round 1 against Abigail should not be doing wake-up super in the first place, because even if it lands, she'll probably still lose the round anyways, so it's a bad decision on her part. So a player that does that probably is not very wise with their resources, but let's ignore that fact. Say you spend the meter to kill Manat here. Go into round 2, and then you get smoked. You get completely zoned out the entire match. Both of you go into round 3 with full meter, assuming you didn't waste it in round 2. Now, you're in a bad situation. Now, you probably should have opted to not kill Manat in that first round with the super. Instead, you should have just saved your meter for round 2 and just played with the life lead. Perhaps. You'll never know, but perhaps that would have been better. There's a situation where you can get away with not going for a kill. Huge life lead against a character who is not very good at making back a life lead, given who they are, what resources they currently have, almost certainly won't make a comeback, and that's fine. But in that situation, you still probably want to try to kill Manat before she has the chance to build more meter for round 2. So maybe just don't go for like a really long timeout win and completely stop being aggressive. Sometimes, it's smart to make compromises between these two extremes. Maybe you can spend 1 bar on your combo to do more damage and put the character at a pixel of life left, and then you have the life lead to survive enough to build back that bar in the same round if you don't kill your opponent sooner than that. And if it starts going badly, you still have the resources that you'll build back the last bar for. The super can go for the chip kill, probably, since you've already put your opponent really low health at a pixel. If they start making a comeback, it's almost certainly because they spent some resource to do that, most likely V-trigger. which means they won't have the V-gauge or the V-shift to reversal your chip kill setup. But that's one side of the, like, spend or save meter situation. The other aspect is player gambling. Like, maybe you feel you should save the resources as a gamble. You think it's totally possible that the opponent could make a comeback and kill you in this round, but you feel that you need to gamble in order to win against this opponent. Perhaps you feel the opponent is better than you, or you're outmatched by their matchup advantages or something. In general, I think it's safer to assume that getting the round right now will be your biggest advantage. But if you really feel that you need to try to gamble to try to win the current round without spending your meter, just make sure you gamble wisely and responsibly. Increasing the risk and reward is a completely valid strategy to make up for disadvantages in matchups or skill disparity, right? You know, sometimes if you're just kind of outmatched, you can still go for strategies that will make up for that in sheer fucking luck. But like I said, in general, and especially at the start, just kill the opponent if you get the chance. So, I've mostly been talking about damage, but setups and the situation are good, and by that I mean anything that gives you a situational advantage. If you can spend a bar to get out of the corner, that's going to be a no-brainer a lot of the time. But there are a lot of other resources in this game that affect the current situation. V-gauge for both you and your opponent, your current stun values, health, the space behind you to the corner, all sorts of stuff. And that's not even including mental resources, like how many reads you have on your opponent that you haven't pulled the trigger on yet, you know? Habits you could take advantage of at any time, but you're waiting for just the right moment. Tricks you haven't used yet, like new fucked up mix-ups or gimmicks or something you're waiting to employ. Stun and mental damage are major factors in when you choose to spend your resources, beyond just the current situation. Let's say maybe you have a bar and a half. You're in mid-screen, you land a hit, and could spend that bar to do a lot of damage and get to the corner. But perhaps you want to save it. Maybe you want to save some of these resources until you have a lot of them. Then unleash them all in one go, one good sequence. Look at this situation. So if you have like just a little bit of meter, can it... Wait. I give myself just one bar? Yeah, there we go. Rarely ever use that feature. You know, and I get some offense going. Like I happen to land like a charge heavy punch or something. I get a knockdown. So I happen to get a hit, and I spin my bar right there, and then he like, let's say he V-shifts. Okay, let's do that. Let's say record wake up actions. So if I happen to land some sort of like knockdown, I get some offense from it. And then I use that offense to like, you know, I'm like, I have the opportunity. I can land the EXSPD, so I choose to do so and give up my resource in doing that. Bam. Now I move in. If he V-shifts and I strike, that's like that. But let's say I hit this, and then I like bait it out with a throw or something like that, and I can cover it with, I believe you can do crush counter heavy kick afterwards. Maybe? Probably not, I guess. So I can punish it with a light SPD, but that's it. I don't get Oki off of the light SPD, he escapes. I've done, you know, all things considered, assuming my mix-ups all land and I like get the stuff going, it's not bad assuming everything works out correctly, but there's like a clear endpoint to the sequence. Like they can just keep spending their resources. The only way for me to not suffer that is to go for this hard read setup, right? Like that. And even then, I won't build enough bar to punish it, to like go for a whiff throw and then punish it with an EX, or if I do this and then do like crouching light kick, I'm still plus, and I'm still in SPD range, so I could still apply offense in this situation. If I had EX SPD to keep up the situation and keep going for the stun, because one of the main benefits, if you land heavy SPD, it does 220 damage, and whatever. EX SPD has more range and gets the same sequence, lands the same damage. The main thing is that EXSPD does way more stun than any of his other SPDs. It is for getting the stun. Like, it has tons of utility, but it is generally a tool you want to apply in big sequences where you can get to the stun. If you don't have at least two bars to go for, like, or you're not going to be able to build at least 2 bars to go for a situation like that and actually lock them down so you can get the stun. Like so. So yeah, it's not good to just spend things because you can hit them, even if you'll do like unscaled damage or something. Especially if they carry risk to them. Like, even if I didn't have all my resources and I was like theoretically landing as much damage as I possibly could before the opponent could eventually escape my grasp. A big risk to any of the bold actions I'm going to be taking in that sequence. Now, stun isn't the only factor in saving your resources for the time when you can make it all add up in multiplicative ways. People tend to panic when they're in a bad sequence like this, and their decision-making will deteriorate. They could make hasty choices that will be bad for them in the long run, like mashing V-shift on wake up only to realize that building their V-trigger was their only chance for a comeback and they ruined it. Don't be fooled into thinking that if someone dies and their opponent is at high health, the round was necessarily far apart. You know, if the opponent's health was lower, you might think the round was closer. But the possibility exists that the guy who lost when his opponent was barely scratched was pretty close to bringing it back if he was smarter about planning his resources around his big comeback. And he just happened to guess wrong and die before he got the chance to start that big sequence, which was a risk he chose to take. He could have very nearly guessed right and used all of his resources to win, while the guy who had a few hits on him was still nowhere near actually taking the round from his opponent. In the same sense, do not feel bad about losses like that. Don't feel bad if you look at like a health disparity in the health round. Don't feel bad about losses in general, I mean, if you can help it, but if you can see clearly that you made the right call with your resources and that it was still highly possible for you to win a match right up until you lost, that's your skill developing, which is what matters. Now let's talk about spending V-gauge. This is more matchup dependent. Maybe your character can fight and win the matchup without trigger, so using the gauge to survive is actually preferable. This is especially true of characters with weaker V-triggers. Like I mentioned before, maybe you can use V-reversal or V-shift to supplement your offense and go for the kill right away, using them offensively, after blocking their V-reversals, maybe to get the knockdown in the corner. Anything defensive can be offensive if you put yourself in the opponent's face. This is something I'd recommend doing if keeping the corner is especially valuable to your character, or if you're in a good sequence and you're going to get rewarded for keeping this sequence up and cashing in. This works very well when combined with other resources like meter. If you can really make good use of the immediate situation. Beyond that, just look critically about your V-trigger tools. How much they help you in neutral against a character, what options you have to activate into trigger, which is also a strong aspect of triggers that you should definitely take full advantage of and not take for granted at all. But beyond that, it's a lot of the same concepts I already talked about. The main difference is, of course, that you can't save your V-trigger for the next round. So plan around spending it with an understanding that if it doesn't win you the round, or at least let you play long enough to build more meter and maybe win the round, then it was more or less a wasted resource. If it was more or less wasted, you know, for any mind games you might have been able to plant the seeds for if you activated your trigger. This means that if you might be put into a situation where you cannot use your trigger, it's probably better to spend it early when you have the chance. Of course, V-reversal does gray damage and heals your own stun upon activation. Remember this, and remember it in advance. If you're, say, this is very important and happens all the time, but let's say you're in mid-screen. You've already gotten hit by a few pokes in a row, a few, like, medium kicks from Cammy or something. Then you take a risk by throwing a fireball or something that gets jumped in on, and they do a full combo that brings you to the corner. Your stun is starting to get high, but not high enough that a throw will stun you. But a shimmy maybe will. Then you decide to take the throw on your wake up because it is the by far and away less risky option in that situation, so you're very likely to take the throw there. Well, now you're in a one-touch to stun situation, and you have to guess between if they meaty you, if they do like a delay button, if they do a walk-up throw, if they do a walk-up shimmy, if they do anything in their pressure, if they have resources to spend to keep the pressure on you, anything will stun you. You're in a one-touch situation. You couldn't, if they just walk up and throw you, you can't V-reversal them. You know, if you take the throw that will just put you a single hit before getting stunned, if you take the throw, you are now in a shit situation because there's no guarantee they will do something that you can block and V-reversal to heal your stun. That's a terrible position to be in. So, case in point, let's look back at that entire sequence. You want to look for V-reversal spots and safety management spots before that meaty throw into walk-up throw situation ever happened in the first place. So, you have something to block and V-reversal to get rid of stun. So, the fact that you got hit by a couple of pokes and then took a risk that made you get hit by a full combo, that was where you fucked up again. If your stun is like above or around 30%, you should not take a gamble that will risk your opponent landing a full combo that will put you in a situation where you have to take a throw because it's the safest option and then you're at one touch. That will happen all the time. Just, you want to preemptively avoid that way earlier on in your stun gauge. If you just got hit by a combo, even a very small one, you don't want to do something that will get you hit by a big combo, because you might be 2 throws and nothing to fucking block away from dying. Or maybe you might not take the meaty throw and accept the gamble earlier on, except that you'll get stunned by the shimmy because the combo will have more scaling on it then, and as a result, can't do as much total damage as if you take the throw and still guess wrong in the end. Alright, let's take this situation for example. So say you get hit by that, or get hit by anything, and then for some reason you do something stupid, you throw a bad fireball or something, and you get hit by that, like a full jumping combo, so your stun was already around like 25-30%, and then you took a big risk that would get you hit by a lot more than that. Now you're in a completely fucked situation. If you take a throw, you're in a situation, or if you take another throw, so there might not be anything to block in order to V-reversal to save you, and now you're literally dead. Cancel the super. So, let's look at this a few other ways. Say you do get a block in V-reversal. Let's say it can be punished by the opponent's resources or anything else. Any V-reversal can be punished. Same situation. Oh, now you're dead. However, now this won't necessarily stop you from still having to guess for your life, but however, and you, like, honestly, it's your fault for taking a big risk in the first place when your stun was at like 30% in the first place. Like, that is, when your stun is here, this is where you start actually having to think about stun. Not when it starts to get high. This is where you start thinking about it, and don't do stupid shit. Because otherwise you're going to get in really bad situations. So let's say they do a shimmy, and you decide, okay, well, I'm not going to take the throw and be in that awful situation. I'm going to tech. Okay, well. Now you've survived. If only barely, but you have survived. Perhaps it gave you resources, perhaps it gave you trigger, perhaps it just gave you time to think and weigh all your options. Perhaps you're not against Cammy and like whatever situation. Let's pick a different character, a character that doesn't get Oki off of their super. Dead. Let's say you get shimmied there instead of taking the first throw before you're put into the guess for game situation. If they do a full combo, in this situation, I haven't built back super, so I can't do that, and I did a full combo, and I'm still not in range to kill you with the throw. So, by teching there, by choosing to tech rather than choosing the option that seems safest because, like, a throw won't stun you, right? So you're like, oh, well, I'll just take the throw here. If you take the shimmy, then you very well could survive to do another mix-up, take the full combo after you get stunned, but it will have higher scaling as a result. So if you're in that situation at the end there, perhaps you're in this situation. Oh, I messed up somewhere in there. Whatever. Perhaps you're in that situation, you decide to take the shimmy, which will lead to like a full combo and stun you, but it will lead to a lot of scaling, and they'll damage scaling, and maybe they won't be able to build the meter for super back in time like they would if they were to get 2 throws in a row on you or something like that. In any case, perhaps you can put yourself in a situation where even if they dump all their resources, you'll still be alive and still have enough health to take a throw afterwards. Especially if they spend CA and they don't to do as much damage, even if you are within throw range after they spend the CA. If they don't get Oki off of their CA, you've effectively escaped their offensive sequence, which was probably a better idea than taking the safe option in the short term, but still being in an even more fucked situation and that much closer to death when you get stunned in the long term. But anyways, I guess that's less of resource management perhaps and more of like a defensive awareness thing. Ah, well. There are a lot of other forms of resource management, but to keep things fun, I would now like to walk through one of my favorite matches of this game from recent memory and point out some of the larger scale resource management decisions going on. So let's talk about the Daigo vs. Gachikun Capcom Cup 2020 exhibition match. Alrighty, so let's take a watch here. Now this is kind of an interesting matchup because it's one of the few cases of like precise use for and against Rashid's V-Skill 2. Now, to be fair, to talk about this matchup, I don't think Gachikun was using the proper risk-reward for V-Skill 2. I think it's much safer to go for the jump than it is to go for the dive kick fake, as you will see frequently. So there he was a bit anti-air. But anyway, so yet to really spend any resources between them, just playing the game. Dai goes back into a corner with Guile, as is often the case. Now, another thing that will become dreadfully apparent as we continue watching this, but Daigo also makes great use of the health and, like, stun gauge / gray life resource management, where he is very particular to stay in a place where, within a certain time frame, because it takes a certain amount of time for after you've taken the last or blocked the last hit that you did, for your gray life to start recovering. So Daigo is almost always in a position where he can either immediately or after delaying a little bit tap him with just something, not even to hit at all, but just to add a little bit of gray life and make sure that his gray life is not recovering. And he uses the space behind him as a resource in order to do just that. So in these interactions, now keep in mind, Daigo, or Guile players especially, mainly use back hard punch for the possibility that it will crush counter. You're not really using it just to throw it out. It's not a particularly good poke. It's whiff punishable on reaction. It doesn't go that far. It has some decent priority being the move that it is, but like he's trying to get a crush counter. And not only that, but because it's a crush counter, it would fill up his V gauge, since when you land crush counters, you gain V gauge. He has V gauge now. He's sitting on 2 bars. He's still in this situation. This is the deficit. So this is generally the situation that always activates. Now usually he likes to activate more on hit, like most players do, but he's used this opportunity. Just take a dash up, do a delayed throw. He waited for like a reversal or something. And he gains back space. This is generally going to be the most consistent thing that Daigo does, is he uses his V-trigger he uses the space behind him mainly to fight most of the matchup. That's the vast majority of what he's doing. He's just using the space behind him as a resource in order to get little hits in exchange and build his other resources, and he mainly uses his V trigger as a way to push out of the corner or side switch entirely. Now, this is what I was talking about. When you go for the dive kick, there is a huge vulnerability in that fact. Whereas if he had just gone for, like, because Gachikun keeps doing this and he keeps kind of getting punished for it in this set. If he had just gone for a jump, like V-Skill 2 into the actual jump, he just would have gotten anti-aired, and that's it. You know, he still would have obviously gotten hit, and it would be easier to hit him, but it won't be as damaging as when he does this and it gets baited or beaten, so. And he hadn't spent a resource that entire time. He lands one solid hit after gaining some information, using all of his walk backing and just collecting data. And I mean, to be frank, it's like, it was Gachikun's mistake that he was even taking such a risk in the first place when he already had Daigo cornered. He had no reason to make up a life deficit. He could have just neutral jumped the boom as they came in the first place. But yes, now he has the life lead with that resource calculation. Takes up a lot of space. Now he did, odd decision there, but yes. Theoretically, I think he was close to taking that round with his resource management. Now, he's much more active here in the corner with taking a hit every now and then, either because of perhaps he's reading Gachikun's passivity, since Gachikun is in the lead and has the superior position. It could be that he's accurately predicting that Gachikun will now be playing more passively, especially since he got punished heavily for being the aggressor when he didn't need to last time, so that's why Daigo is more active in the corner with taking his turns and such. Or perhaps he's completely fine with building his resources, even if he does get hit. Now, any opportunity to side switch and get all the space behind him is a godsend for Daigo, and he's going to use all the space behind him. He honestly doesn't need to spend any resources except the space behind him at this point, if I were to wager a guess, not remembering exactly how this goes, to make up the life deficit with little bits of chip damage and little pokes here and there as he keeps moving backwards and forcing Gachikun to chase. And again, Daigo usually doesn't spend much meter. He likes very straightforwardly saving the super for when it will give him the life lead or the kill. Now this is a staple of how he plays this match entirely. He keeps using the space behind him, and then every now and then he walks forward for a poke, like a low-medium kick, a fireball, a Sobot kick, or a stand-heavy kick most of the time. Just to keep poking and making sure the gray life isn't going down, which will become more relevant as the match goes on. So in all of these rounds, every single round so far, even though the first round, which he was very close to winning anyways, and he made a strangely aggressive play that made him run into attack and get killed, when he definitely easily could have gone the other way. But all of these rounds, he has immediately been pushed to the corner and been on the back foot the entire time, but his resources and where he applies them has always been the place where he has created the opportunities to get the upper hand. Like, everything about the play is being won because of the resource management here. One of the rare times where he actually chooses to use EX without doing super, and it's in a situation where he's not close to building super. Theoretically, let's look at, the life lead. Say he lands, some button, like a jump in, flash kick, super. It would kill from here. But he has a lot of space behind him. He has a lot of health to take and then be able to activate Trigger, which he can get very safe routes to do lots of chip damage and perhaps go for side switches and stuff, which will give him space to work with and create more opportunities to apply offense. He has so many reasons to think that Gachikun's health will lower before he even gets Super, and it's the last round anyways, so he has no reason whatsoever to play for Super unless he's planning to chip out. Like, whittle his health down to here and then use the Super to chip out. Now, reasonably speaking, I don't think it's that. I think it's somewhere in the middle ground, right? He's obviously not going to build all the way up to Super before Gachikun's health is lowered to the point where it probably isn't necessary to use that as his big play, right? But I don't think that if he only plays until he builds Super, I don't think he will have dealt enough damage to like chip damage or anything else like that so that he's in chip range. So, because neither strategy in which you could use Super to win is particularly effective based on the current resources and situation, space behind him, health scenarios, that is why he's using EX here, because playing to the Super does not make sense here. Now, he has plenty of opportunities to take a lot of hits, and then when he gets Trigger, he'll be able to fight his way out of the corner, even if he's cornered. It's a very powerful Trigger, so for safety's sake. And yes, more EX expenditures, because again, he's getting chip damage. Now he's in a position where any hit will get the kill. Obviously spending V reversal, going for more chip situations. There's a very limited... At that point, he honestly could have played for Super anyways, because there was a very limited number of options that Gachikun could have done, especially since several of Gachikun's offensive plays would have also just resulted in getting guaranteed V reversal down again if he had chosen to go for them. So Gachikun's offensive plays were limited as such. Now, Daigo tends to keep an EX gauge on him most of the time. Let's see. So, he was about 2 bars there. This is where he decides to spend EX, so that if he were to get a hit, if he were to get comboed at this point, he would still have the meter to do an EX reversal, so that he would have at least that threat available if things started turning sour. Now, just like any offensive play that he makes is just a little walk forward into a button, like a light or some sort of medium, just some sort of poke, and like that's all he mainly does. He doesn't make any aggressive forward movements most of the time other than that. And he's completely fine with whatever small risks are associated with his playstyle, like getting whiff punish for back heavy punches, because resource management wise, that is 100% within his ballpark, is something that will benefit him in the long run. Getting those small hits that don't lead to big sequences. Remember, Daigo has not even been, as much as Daigo has been like cornered in like the starts of these rounds and such, Daigo has never even been close to getting stunned based on the risks that he's taken. He hasn't gotten like risked taking a big hit in the neutral that would lead to a big combo and then into like a throw that would lead to him actually having to worry about his stun if it gets to around here. That has not happened up to yet. So he is totally fine taking these risks that will that could potentially get him hit in small ways that will just lower his health and safely build his V gauge without having to worry about stun. So yeah, any forward movement he does just like is to, because he's always moving backwards, he's always threatening that backwards movement. He's not trying to make an aggressive play at all. Anytime he moves forward, it's just because his backwards movement will bait Gachikun into taking some sort of action or doing some sort of forward movement that he can surprise with a sudden small walk up. But he's not like trying to walk up to throw range or anything like that. That's never the goal. Yep, he's totally fine with taking that. Again, like I said, his risk reward, he will take these small risks in the neutral. He's totally fine with doing that because all things considered, it's totally said. His stun's going down now. He's building up his resources. So his gray life is starting to go. Got a little hit. No, he actually let it go that time. Got whiff punish, no big deal. He almost has full resources. He can easily use the space behind him in a lot of these situations, or if he gets cornered, he'll be able to use Trigger to push out back to at least around this spacing and mid-screen, all the while dealing enough chip damage to get into a position. So he's basically already checkmated. You know, they would be very difficult, unless there were mistakes from Daigo, for Gachikun to succeed in this round. At best, he could force Daigo to spend the super to get a chip kill. The great thing about watching a match in terms of resource management, rather than the individual actions and like reads and little footsies decisions and such, is that you can so clearly like see a greater arc of how someone is already fucked, you know? You can clearly see when someone is already just basically like all the doors are closing in on them, the resources and decision and positioning and realistic scenarios are just meaning like absolute death is a certainty basically, and it would be incredibly difficult to avoid all the options and situations that the resources can provide in order to complete the victory. Alright, got some gray life, let's see. Oh. Yeah, that happens sometimes, it's a funny interaction. Probably tried to go for a whiff punish, but that forward medium punch can accidentally catch you reacting to it. You can whiff punish it, but if you do anything slower than like a light, you'll probably get hit by the second hit. So that was the worst his stun has generally been in these situations. Now, Gachikun has full meter, spends easy here. I mean, it would be exhausting to look at, like, both player and how they're managing their meters, and also the potential of how the opposite player is considering his opponent's meter management and what decisions or situations might unfold. But, yeah. So, almost a trigger, still building up that bar. He's always just, like, a battery, you know? Like, his meter does not exactly, like, he so clearly plays to the super so most of the time, unless there's a situation like what happened in one of those rounds where he started using EX moves, where logically the super was not the correct course of action, but it usually almost is for Guile. Almost always is. And, like, the great thing about the resource management aspect of this is the restraints. Like, there is no possibility that Daigo is going to, like, that Gachikun has to worry about accidentally walking into an EX Sonic Boom from Daigo. It's just not a move Daigo is ever going to do unless it makes tactical sense for him to do so. He's not going to break his resource management and, like, the more abstract game plan, the abstract plan to victory that he's going, just for the possibility that he might land an EX Sonic Boom. It just won't happen, so he shows inherent restraint and will never do that unless, like, the game plan fundamentally changes in certain scenarios. So, crazy V-Skill 2 shit. Both characters are at full resources. Yep, he was totally fine with all that. He basically did, like, plenty of damage. Now, the interesting scenario is that Daigo is totally willing to just do that stuff and until it ends up getting him hit, like in that scenario. Even though he already has full resources, he doesn't want to spend some to get... This is what I was talking about before. Like, if you start around with full resources, do you want to spend at least some of it so that your actions and anytime you get hit will continue to build you more meter? Because all these Sonic Booms he's throwing are not building him any more meter because he's already maxed out. But it's very interesting that Daigo at least calculates and decides that he does not want to spend it even even though it is a waste. Theoretically, it is a waste to not build any more meter with all the actions he keeps doing. But no, he will not just spend meter just to spend meter. He would rather keep all of his resources on him. Alright, so nothing that's happening really particularly matters until we actually start to take into account any of these resources. Right? None of that matters. He's actually in, like, a risky scenario now. This is the first time he's been in danger of stun. So he actually he's forced to make decisions here, regardless of what his resources say. But he decides correctly. He does spend an EX, and rightfully so. I mean, the situation is very advantageous for him. Could he have possibly anti-aired that without spending EX? Could he have done a regular flash kick, perhaps into super? Would that have been valuable? I don't think he would ever want to spend super in that scenario, but... And perhaps he was already thinking about using EX flash kick anyways. Like, the reason why that was his instinct is because it was already on the brain, which means that he was expecting maybe Gachikun to, like, dash up or press some button or something, for which he would do an Ume flash kick and take his turn and keep the corner position. So he spent one V-gauge and one piece of meter. So this is, like, one of the rare situations where he doesn't go all in on his resource game plan. Now, obviously Gachikun with a big life lead is most likely going to take that throw, so Daigo takes that as more or less guaranteed damage. Now, this is, again, a situation where probably Daigo already ascertained that... Now, this is a weird situation because looking at the health... Looking at the resources, looking at the situations, I think that he could have played to super and then whittled his health down to this point, gotten a chance to land the super, and killed him there. Perhaps it's a matter of the ways in which he can land the super. Like, to land the super, he has to jab out some sort of offense. Like, he has to land, like, a crouch jab into a sonic boom on, like a defensive shimmy type situation like he's done before, or, like, any forward movement, or he has to land an anti-air to it, or beat one of his V-Skill 2, like, dive kick things like he's done a couple of times. So those are the only realistic situations, or if he gets a crush counter back heavy punch. Those are the only situations where he can realistically land super. So perhaps the reason he didn't play to super here and he spent an EX gauge was either because he felt that he immediately needed to nullify and remove the tornado as a threat, like, it was more important to survive this one situation, especially since he didn't have another round to play with. He had to win this round. So perhaps he felt threatened by the potential of the V-trigger and anything, that he had to like spend his resources to deal with this current situation in the short term, even if it meant messing him up in the long term. Ironically, he ends up getting punished in the short term as well by this. But that would be my assumption as to what his thought process was like. Because I think it would have been somewhat reasonable to still play for super in this situation, if he was not threatened by getting killed by the V-trigger in front of him, perhaps, or or maybe he felt like he wouldn't be able to safely and effectively get into a situation where he can land the super. Because, like, a lot of the times where he has super available to get the big chunk to kill are times where he could also still technically play the long game and go for a chip kill in the end. Which definitely was almost certainly never going to happen there. With his life the way it was, and his resources, he probably wasn't going to build V-trigger. So, it would have been incredibly difficult for him to play to the chip kill, so... Perhaps that's why he spent it there. Did not work out for him in that instance. Now again, all these back heavy punches are big risks. We've seen multiple times Gachikun whiff punish them, but like I said, small risks. Daigo will happily eat a sweep whiff punish and just build more V-gauge because of it. Alright, so every time he builds a little bit of gray life, I think as the match continues, he starts abusing the gray life more and more and more. That's a big thing of what I remember from this set. That was a weird attempt at like a raw, meaty sonic boom. I wonder if that was an input error. Again, Daigo's resources, because like Gachikun is much more willing to spend resources every now and then here and there, and it's like I'm not studying Gachikun's resource management that carefully compared to Daigo's, which is the main point of this, but See, now he's a little bit more tentative. I think because he doesn't need that many more hits in order to build V-Gauge, so he would much rather take, like, a throw or two to build his V-Gauge rather than risk getting hit into, like, a big combo, or risk getting hit into at least a small combo into a throw. Like, if he gets hit by, like, a standing heavy punch into a knockdown and then into a throw, that would, like, waste about this much V-Gauge in terms of the total damage. I think that's why he's not particularly buttonsy here, or at least in the close range that he was. Now he takes that. Yeah, he was totally willing to take a throw there. Yep. Now he's absolutely playing for chip, right? Resources the way they are. Daigo always saves up his resources. It's always so disheartening as the opponent to, like, look at that and be like, oh, fuck. Man, he hasn't spent a resource. He hasn't spent any resources. Because, like I said, the resources he's constantly spending is just the space behind him. He will happily corner himself and then take minor risks or do things in the corner just to build himself V-Gauge and, like, build all of his resources for sequences. So, yeah. He actually spent an EX yet. That shocks me, looking at the scenario. I wonder what the thought process was. Let's take a look at how he spends his other resources. What was the situation where he spent the EX? What the fuck? Okay, built some Gray Life with that. Built more Gray Life with that guaranteed knockdown situation. What was the situation that he V-reversaled? I think it was just like a low void into Fireball, or maybe a Crouch Fierce into Fireball, yeah. So he would have been fine. It's not like that was starting any offense for Gachikun. It was just would have set them back to neutral. But he wanted to land that, either to gain the space advantage and then be able to throw a boom afterwards, which was totally safe and deal a little bit more. I can only imagine it would be for the Gray Life, which only really makes sense to me if he's playing for chip. But after he did the Sonic Boom, maybe he was just very confident that Gachikun would not expect a super fast Fireball and would try to make like a small walk-up. Or maybe he was expecting a V-Trigger activation. That could have also been possible. Maybe that would have interrupted a V-Trigger activation if he activated it right after he got done with the block stun of the previous boom. I'm not entirely sure. I could lab it, but I don't give a fuck. Let's see what happens from here. Now, he loves doing the knee, even if it puts him in range where he will get thrown. He will love just tapping the opponent with the knee, which is a great tool to just tap people with, because, look, it's just a thing to knock so that you don't get to recover your Gray Life. Gray Life recovering now. Yeah, he's totally going for, like, spinning meter. He's not playing for the super anymore. Which is interesting. I mean, I guess, like, he does not feel threatened by Gachikun's resources, and that's why he's doing it, but I still don't see the reason why. He hasn't been rewarded for any of the meter that he spent in doing these EX moves so far. Perhaps there's some mental damage plan, or, like, particular reads that just do not happen to be working out, maybe technical specific stuff. I really don't understand these EX moves that he spent here, but since the path to a chip kill victory was just, like, so plain and clear, you know. I guess, like, I mean, he builds so much meter. If he had only spent one of the two EX things that he did spend, he would still be in a prime position to do the chip sequence. I mean, he definitely had the life to slowly take the small risks that he takes. And it's not like Gachikun could melt his health bar very quickly with the resources that he does have. Even with V-Trigger, Rashid's V-Trigger 1 still requires meter to get, like, decent, like, strong damage from, so. Alright, building up some Gray Life. The little tap with the Fireball. Guaranteed relatively safe Oki. He almost has super. He's safe from the last round. Maybe that was the idea. Maybe he... Because I think because in the previous round, perhaps the mentality was that in the previous game, he ended up losing the third round in a similar situation. Like I said, probably because he thought he couldn't play to the super and that he was already in too low of a health point to, like, just assume that he would be able to safely survive long enough to get into a position where he could play to land the super or get a chip kill or something. So I think that was the mentality. That he wanted... The reason why he was spending EX moves rather than playing for chip is because he really, really wanted to go into the next round with more resources at the start. So let's see how he uses them. I'm almost certain that was the mentality. And that's why after he spent EX moves, he just played in a way that was extremely non-aggressive and would just like work to build that meter back, which he has basically done at the start of this round. So yeah, I'm assuming he felt that he needed to make that adjustment and actually have meter for the next round afterwards, because that is when he lost in the previous game. Yep. So now he is using his early meter advantage. And it's like, you know, he obviously has to do the occasional EX Flash Kick. If he only plays for Super all the time without ever using EX Flash Kick on defense, it becomes way easier to apply offense to Guile. You know, he has to represent EX Flash Kick even if it does take away some of his meter. And it's not like he really needs... Here, let's look at the previous situation. So in this situation, assuming he didn't land that EX Flash Kick and his health point was here, like, he's still not within the range where he's going to land any hit that's going to kill with CA. He's not in a range where he can do back Fierce Crush Counter into CA. He has plenty of health to risk in the first place, so it's fine. So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense as a decision. And it's not like he sabotaged his game of playing to Super. None of these... That did not seem to help mitigate the situation either. He spent the EX to take out 2 of the hits of the tornado, of the V-Trigger one from Rashid. If he had gotten a 3rd hit, he would have been able to nullify it completely, but he hasn't managed to do that, and he still had to respect it and deal with the mix-up off of it in each of these instances, so I'm not sure that's, like, at least the way it's working out right now, that's the most safety-oriented plan, you know? Perhaps there could be, but, I mean, then again, that is just the strength of Rashid's V-Trigger 1. You won't always have great tools against it. It is very controlling of the neutral. Even if it's not necessarily rewarding. You know, he greatly controlled the neutral with it. Daigo spent meter and still didn't get back control of the neutral. But it wasn't that rewarding for Gachikun. He didn't make up the life lead. And Daigo has all the space and can take very minor risks so they can slowly build up the last little bit he needs for V-Trigger 1 and make it really bad. So we're almost in a position where his resources are at the point where he is complete. He is dead. He's pretty much... Okay, now he's pretty much dead. I'm almost certain. Let's watch how this plays out. Daigo has no need to do little pokes and little plays to Grey Life anymore, not really. He didn't even try to whiff punish that, because it doesn't matter. That's not where the game is won now. As soon as he takes the next, like, little jab or little chip damage of anything, he will win, basically. I mean, Gachikun does recognize that. See, he's, like, whiffing these buttons. He's not doing them in contact range. He's, like, he knows he has to gamble at this point, and he's not trying to do anything that will give him trigger unless he lands a really big hit to start with. Alright, well, now he's fucked. Yep. Yep, he was guaranteed dead for a while before the end of that match. Alright, early on, it's the same thing. Taking these, like, half-baked risks and playing the neutral in, like, little exchanges and such. Totally willing to take these minor risks, and if he ends up building a life lead early, then it's just all the better for him. Totally willing to use the space behind him and keep moving in and out, but mostly backwards. He's very consistent at recognizing when Gachikun is, like, going to become more passive, especially since his tendency has been, this is the second time where Daigo's become more, like, rapid-fire active once he's been cornered, because he recognizes that Gachikun wants to sit on the position for a little bit and not take any rash actions that might get him, that might lose him his advantage, especially since Gachikun is not in the lead right now. Best way to mitigate that? Honestly, that was probably just a misspacing from Gachikun. You know, it's much better if the V-trigger is placed much further away. So, Probably an accidental misjudgment of the spacing and where he could get away with placing the V-trigger one. Alright, so we've taken a few. Let's look at the sequence and see, like, Daigo's risk-reward management or anything. Because, like I said, he's totally willing to take these hits to build his resources. Where did this start? Okay, he walked up, so he bid on the shimmy. So he wanted to tech. I mean, if you, like, it's not that he probably wouldn't have taken a throw. Like, I think the thought process there, and this is, you know, what most players should engage, is that, like, like I say, you don't want to try to win every single situation. You don't want to try to guess right every single time. So sometimes you will intentionally guess wrong or make a decision that could be wrong, and that's not really the most important factor. So in this situation, I think Daigo teched not because he really needed to tech. Perhaps he was worried about getting back thrown into the corner. I don't know. They were pretty much in mid-screen, and, like, Rashid's back throw is not like Ken's back throw, where it has, like, tons of corner carry backwards. But it's still and it's not like Daigo rejects playing in the corner. I mean, probably the not wanting to get put in the corner is a factor in why he made this decision here. But, I mean, there is a risk in him teching the throw where if he had gotten hit by standing heavy punch rather than crouching medium kick that Gachikun did here, he could have gone into the EX Eagle Spike into, like, Mixer or whatever and still put him in the corner. So he risks getting put in the corner either way, so as long as he guesses wrong. So it's not like he only has to worry about the back throw. But, yeah, I think this tech was less of, like, a decision of, like, he really thought that, or he felt that he needed to tech in this situation, and this is more of, like I said, again, sometimes you just have to represent certain options and throw them in, sprinkle them in, even if you don't necessarily think they're going to work, just because you need the opponent to not, like, know guaranteed what you're going to do in the situation. So it's like, it makes perfect sense for Daigo to just sit there and take a throw, but if he only does what makes perfect sense 100% of the time, he'll be that much easier to predict, and then he'll start to slowly lose his advantages if he always gets punished for taking the safest, most logical option all the time. So sometimes, like I said, you just sprinkle in things that you know probably aren't, like, risk-reward good, just to keep up the facade implanted in the opponent's head that they can't predict you that easily, you know? There's a certain % chance that they're going to go for something on a prediction, and they're going to be wrong because you're going to sprinkle in the other options and other rotation of options, even if you don't really need to. So he teched because you'll always have to represent all the options, even if it's not necessarily the smartest quote-unquote plan in that situation. So that tech was for long-term, not to win that situation. And so on, you know. Lots of defensive decisions are taken with that mentality in this game. Take an option that could get you hit, and you honestly feel like they might get you hit, but just because you want to play the long game and condition the opponent with your defensive choices. Alright, so let's look at the resources again. We're at full resources. We've been at full resources for a little bit now. Daigo does have to make up a bit of a deficit. Actually, when did he get all this gray life? Let's look at that. Okay, crouching medium kick, back heavy punch. That would have given him a big life lead if he got the crush counter for the back heavy punch, so that's obvious why he went for that. Sobot, probably not intending to hit. I mean, he was at the range where I think if Gachikun did a certain action and he got counter hit, he could have converted into crouch jab, flash kick into super, or perhaps crouch jab, fireball into trigger activation, into a big combo, which would have given him tons of space, or perhaps into super or something. Move backwards and then do, go for an upside down kick. Probably just to, again, keep building the gray life. Fireball. Just tap him with something so that his gray life doesn't recover. Tap him with something. Yep. Advance forwards. Didn't anti-air there. That's a bit surprising. But yeah, he pulls him closer, and then he you know, his gray health is starting to add up. He activates his very, very easy to get into V-trigger. Gets a dash up. I think Gachikun probably tried to jump out there. I can't really see his inputs right there, or perhaps he wanted to do backdash. Perhaps it was an input error. He gets caught, like, holding up, most likely, and now he's fucked. So I think the mentality was that he was probably thinking about the threat of back throw into the corner / upside down kick. And if he had backdashed or held up, he would have at least survived the upside down kick. You know, if he got throw baited with the upside down kick point blank. Cuz I do this a lot with Falk, where anytime I land and activate into V-Trigger 2, I'm often cornered myself, and I land it, and I get a very guaranteed situation where 80% of the time I will probably do a meaty back throw on my opponent into the corner, and it always lands because there's a massive threat of the fact that I might do my throw baiting overhead that is also plus on block in that very guaranteed situation. So, same mentality here. When Guile does boom into activation, he gets a dash up. Very, clean setup for him to do something, and you do not want to get back thrown in this situation. You do not want anything to happen in this situation. This situation sucks to be in because of the value Guile will get off the back throw with all these resources and the trigger and such. So I think that's why he tried to predict the mix between the throw and perhaps the upside down kick and, backdashed or held up. But other than that, I can't think of a different logical reason why he would have gotten himself hit by something that was more than capable of killing him there. Build up a bit of Gray Life. It's just barely started to recover the Gray Life from that back punch. He needed a fireball. All right, got a very safe heavy kick using the plus frames of the boom that he just threw. Builds some more Gray Life, and he keeps moving back and forth. That's another great thing about Daigo. His movement is very his decisions, his choices are very, very controlled and low risk for a fireball character who's not just purely relying on fireball plus frames and pushback and such. So he gets little 2-move sequences back to back all the time. That are incredibly safe. A lot of times he'll buffer a light kick there. That time he backdash. So a lot of his choices are 2 or 3 buttons or actions in a row that are incredibly tightly controlled. And that's why he can do all of these different things in neutral, but still have so much control all the time. And so yeah, little movement forwards, jab, the crush, building up more Gray Life. Very patient. I mean, he's just in a regular bad spot right here. That was bad. He could have gotten a down forward heavy kick punish on that instead. That would have probably been more optimal, but that's a very minor. Again, similar situation. It's upside down kick, standing medium punch meaty, or get back thrown in the corner and give Guile all the space backwards while his resources are already building up, and the health lead is not even that great. That was an interesting bazooka knee. I think there was a decent chance that Gachikun would have expected Daigo. The bait was that Daigo just got the back throw into the corner. He's got all the space behind him. He was expecting Gachikun to take some sort of action. The bazooka knee is great at stopping any action or any forward movement as a quick check, even though it's minus if the opponent just stays blocking most of the time. But I also think that Daigo is more than happy to put himself in this -2 situation and take some damage just to build the last little bit of his V-gauge. If you've noticed, rarely has Daigo ever, taken a big combo that would give him V-gauge. You know what I mean? Rarely has he ever been in a situation where he's on this last bar of his V-gauge, and then he gets hit by a big combo that would have built, this much V-gauge for it to go up to here, you know? Every time that he's, just about to go here, he is always playing in a way in which he only will take little hits here and there. Yep. Took a little hit. You know, what was the threat there? What honestly, he block crouching medium kick. What was the potential threat that he could have faced in that situation if Gachikun decided to do something else? Honestly, I think Daigo is thrilled that Gachikun cancel that crouching medium kick into light fireball. That's not going to help Gachikun significantly. That just gets like 60 fucking damage. He like it doesn't help him control the neutral. The situation is basically just back to regular neutral anyways. And Daigo now has his resources completely ready to go. So he was totally willing to bet on like the potential that he would get frame trapped there, take an action if it had been rewarded, if he did like whatever he did, like a fireball, I think, after blocking the crouching medium kick. Which, like, had a decent possibility of hitting, since Gachikun did low forward, which has the threat of the fireball, which he did, so. So, yeah. Now, it's a rough spot for Gachikun here. Despite having the life lead, you can see he's being very passive and letting all this chip damage happen. It's like, oh, fuck, oh, fuck. Daigo can also whiff punish. I mentioned the couple of ways in which Daigo, or Guile can combo into super, but Daigo also practices a lot of whiff punishing specific moves with raw super with Guile, so that is also a big threat as well. He could definitely, if like Gachikun whiffs like a crouching heavy punch, he could definitely get whiff punished with super. Yeah. Super backing up, again, using the space behind him as a resource. I think that's why Daigo had not been applying the offense up to that point, especially because, like, I think this is honestly a mistake from Gachikun, because one of the things that can be bad for Guile in his V-Trigger 1, which is his good sequences of booms back to back to back, one of the major threats that stops him from, like, totally controlling all the offense and screen space at that point is V-reversals from characters like Rashid that have a roll. If Daigo had done, like, let's say a crouching medium punch into a fireball, into a V-trigger fireball, like, once he's already active, I mean. If he had done, like, a sequence of 2 fireballs back-to-back using the cancel properties that he gets in V-trigger 1, and Gachikun had V-reversaled one of them, he would have gotten a clean, fat fucking punish on the opposite side of Guile still recovering from throwing those V-trigger booms. So, I think this is the mentality, is that Daigo does not want to be and start and do V-Trigger 1 shit until Gachikun's V-reversal is off the table. So that's why I honestly think that it's a mistake for Gachikun to even use the V-Trigger in this sense, right? Honestly, resource-wise, I don't think he really needs to. You know, he can play neutral other ways in order to get in. But yeah, having the V-reversal, which is a huge like thorn in the side of Guile's V-Trigger 1 and other Fireball characters, you know, due to the way that you can get big punishes on Fireball cancels, I think it would have been better to hang on to this V-reversal so that you can completely stop Daigo from applying block strings with Trigger 1. And yeah, he still has all the space to move backwards. It's not like the trigger is going to reward him in this situation. So, if he had landed a hit into the V-Trigger 1, sure. Or gotten him more close to the corner where he would have started to have to take actions. But this situation, I think it would have just been better overall to hold on to the V-reversal, and now he's fucked. I don't know if he's dead. Probably not. But yeah, not much can be done. And what is that? Is that the whole set? Or is that, no, it's a first to whatever. Gray Life. Gray Life with those heavies. Some fireballs. So really willing to go off that. Some more Gray Life. Oh, that, surprisingly, that's his first back fist of the set. Now, back fist is great when you're right outside the range of it, and the opponent thinks that they can inch forwards. It's a great substitute. I mean, it can be crouched and whiff punish, but like when you're confident it will work, it's a great substitute for never spending EX Sonic Booms, because it's something that will just catch the opponents walking forward since it comes out so far so fast. And great situation to use it. Cash out some of that Gray Life that he's just been safely building up. Yep. What did I fucking say? Fireball characters are afraid of roll V reversals like Rashid's. That's what makes it dangerous for Guile to be active in doing V-Trigger 1 stuff when Rashid has that tool. Interestingly enough, this is one of the first situations where Daigo very quickly pushed Gachikun to the corner. So Gachikun used that in a defensive way. Also, Daigo has not been doing a ton of, like, crouching medium punch cancels, and I believe that's what he got the hit from. Yeah. That's, I believe, the first time, other than the time that he hit him after the V-trigger activation, that's the first time he did this on block. Standing medium punch, crouching medium punch in this set. And so because he was extremely confident that crouching medium punch would go into a fireball, this is a guaranteed punish if he does that. Yep. But yeah, I think most of the time, Gachikun has not had other than that instance, he hasn't had great opportunities to use that V-reversal counter the fireball tech. Because most of Daigo's fireballs have been individual fireballs and not off of cancels from a normal, like crouching medium punch. It basically can only be crouching medium punch. Unless he's in trigger. So again, I'm very curious as to whether or not he's going to activate trigger before V-reversal's off the table. Again, full resources spent. It's always just like, you get to this point in the match and you're like, God damn it. I still have to deal with this shit. Now, he spent it there. Again, I think this was a matter of feeling out of necessity, perhaps. Perhaps he didn't feel like, in this situation, he'd be able to land a hit into super. Be interesting to see how... But yeah, it's just a bad spot for him to be in. So how did we get here? How did he land that hit? Because that's where he really won it. This situation, this is a great, clever read. So Daigo did a delay throw tech, expecting an EX reversal from Gachikun. So that's why he did that. And Gachikun's very quick neutral jump. Did he do an immediate neutral jump or delayed neutral jump? That's the question. Either way, he made the complete right read that Daigo would do a delayed throw tech. I'm not going to frame by frame this. Let's say he immediately wakes up because he's just such a fucking Chad. He's so confident. Great read. Very infrequent read. Like, relatively speaking, this was not a particularly risky thing that Daigo did, right? At least assuming players play off of how they make decisions that they normally make, right? In most situations, you're either going to have to deal with, like, wake-up buttons. So, like, his main threat there would have been if Gachikun decided to do, like, wake-up light kick or something and then went and walked and threw Daigo, right? Went for a throw, you know? Like, he blocks into a delayed throw tech. That means he's fine with giving up his offense in an attempt to bait out Gachikun's EX reversal, EX spinning mixer. This is one of the rarer and more precise. Like, this is basically the only thing Gachikun could have done in order to really make it this relatively safe choice from Daigo hurt. So, a very good read from Gachikun and very good awareness of, like, what options are available. Technically, he had another option. He could have done, if he was expecting a delayed throw tech, which is what that is the only thing that would have beaten, as it did. He also could have done a delayed standing heavy kick with Rashid and then activated that on hit into V-trigger. But I think the neutral jump makes more sense because if you get hit out of it, especially if it's slightly delayed on wake-up so you block for the first frame on your wake-up, you would just get anti-aired and you would survive the anti-air. You would survive the hit from the anti-air, which is totally fine for you. Whereas if you do the heavy kick and it's blocked... it's either -4, which will get you killed, or you have to cancel it into V-trigger to keep it safe on block. And then you get like some plus frames or whatever, but like you've essentially wasted your V-trigger. So the neutral jump makes way more sense than anything else. So that is, again, essentially the only option Gachikun could have done that would have really punished what Daigo did. Which just like speaks to how good Gachikun's predictions are, and also how calculated Daigo's decision was. Like, in almost any other scenario, what he did would have been perfectly calculated and perfectly risk-averse, right? But instead, he gets that hit there, and his general safety-first game plan has kind of been uprooted at this point. This is just a bad spot for him to be in. There were a million ways he could have died at this position, so he did. See? Little walk-forward jab, just to stop the Grey Life from recovering. More Grey Life there. Grey Life. Little poke with that. Yep. Totally fine to just use the space to back off and not even try to counter whatever Gachikun's doing. Just add more Grey Life. That's what he's playing to most of the time. He already has a big lead. That's all he really needs to. Now he's in the position where he's just trying to generate Gachikun accidentally gets thrown when he was trying to shimmy. That's unfortunate for him. Another meaty boom. That's interesting. You know what? You know why I think he's doing that? You know, I think he's doing raw meaty boom. If he does like a jab or a crouching medium punch into boom, you know, if he meaties with like crouch strong into boom, that could also be punished by the V reversal. I think that's why he's doing just a straight meaty boom. Again, not that bad for... Now, the stun is bad. How did we get to this point? Because he's actually at risk for stun here. I love Daigo's like use of forward jumps, even if there's a clear possibility that he could be punished. His ability, not so much in this set, but like in his general game plan, Daigo's ability to forward jump out of the corner, even if he takes a bit of damage for doing so, is just so fucking great, man. Okay, so yeah, he took a hit. He used an opportunity. So I would say the only real risk that he took that wasn't just him, like, guessing wrong on situations where he was forced to guess on the opponent's offense was when he took that opportunity to jump out of the corner. And that's the only reason why, potentially why his stun is at this point. But it could have easily happened if he stayed in the corner, especially since Gachikun already had trigger, right? So being cornered against Rashid with trigger ready to go is way worse than like this situation. I think Daigo is much happier to survive this situation. Especially since Rashid doesn't get true Oki off of that, even if Daigo is close to stunned and in a bad spot. Alright, now he's relatively safe. He has all the resources. He is complete. Like, it's done. Yep. Gachikun does not have V-reversal built up. Oh, he could have won there. Awkward situation, yeah. And he lands a big early hit as soon as he can confirm into CA, which I definitely think he considers to be the most optimal way to spend it. And, like, realistically speaking, he's not going to land, like, 3 separate sonic booms in a row. So, and look at the damage that does. Yeah, it's definitely the most optimal way to spend Guile's meter. His super is really good. So, yeah, as soon as he landed a single solid thing that he knew would go into super, he immediately did it in this final game, or final round situation. So that's, like, you know, that's been talked about, like, the round start, if you have super, do you spend it as soon as possible, if it'll hit? Absolutely in this situation. And now he has all this space, all this resources, he can just make it back up. He's winning. He can just keep doing this gray life shit. It's rough to watch. Yeah, that's not going to net him much. Again, he's already complete because... like, Daigo is not going to be in a position where he's going to get stunned, strictly speaking, and, yeah, he'll just build up the, V... That was a nice block from Daigo, but yeah. He'll just build up the V-gauge even if he took a bit more damage. He would have definitely been guaranteed to build enough meter over that course of time to go for a chip kill. Yep. The only thing that I think is that I think Gachikun's spending of his own V-trigger, his own V-gauge was could have been better. Could have been like saving it for protection against some of those guaranteed resource death situations from Guile, and you know, not using his V-trigger. Like that's where I feel like his resource management went astray and allowed Daigo to more easily deconstruct him. Is there another set? There is. Oh my god. Okay, I thought it was over. I'm fucking dumb motherfucker. Oh no, this is a replay. Okay, yeah, that's done.